Hello all and welcome. My name is Shay Sinnott. I'm Director of Programs with Foresight Canada, and I'm very happy to be here. We've got an amazing panel today. Our topic, leadership, being a great CEO. I'm going to say a little bit about who we are and where I am. So with a great deal of respect, we acknowledge the lands and the peoples of this land across Canada, or what we call Canada on Turtle Island as Foresight Canada. We work across the country, and so we honor the traditional, ancestral, and in some cases unceded territories of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I'm speaking to you from Vancouver Island, actually, and the lands of the Comox people. I'm looking off to my screen in the beautiful ocean that I can see from my little desk here. And yeah, I think given our topic today, one thing I would note is an acknowledgement of different ways of being in relation to each other. And so while we as Foresight often acknowledge all that we have to learn on the topic of clean technology and environmental sustainability from First Nations people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial, I wonder as well if there are ways that we can learn from many different First Nations people, Inuit, Métis, about different ways of being in relation to each other. So as leaders, as teams, in community. So I'll just put that to the group. Our quick agenda here, be together for an hour. I'm excited to listen to Clir, Dixon, and our amazing panel. And moving right along, for those of us that are new to Foresight, our goal as Foresight Canada is for Canada to be the first G7 country to reach net zero. I always smile when I say that out loud because it's so bold. We call this our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal. And we do that in many ways through acceleration and adoption of clean technology, also ecosystem building. And so I conceive of this, or I think of this event, these series of events, these Fireside Chats to that end, in supporting our community and coming together and learning about these key topics. So that's us. As I said, do that in many ways. I think we can keep going, Misha. And we're really proud of our impact since 2015. We've done a lot. And we're doing more with this BHAG too. You're going to see some numbers pop up around environmental sustainability and impact. So that's us as Foresight. An incredible panel. I'm going to introduce Clir Dixon, and then I believe she's going to introduce our speakers today. So Clir Dixon, CEO and co-founder at Neuraura, also a beloved Foresight EIR, I think for like 4 or 5 years, Clir. Has a master's in engineering, went to Harvard, went to Cambridge, and really focuses on business sustainability, strategic consulting, and M&A advisory, and supports many companies at Foresight. And so on this topic of leadership and team development, really excited to hear from Clir. So I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Shay. And I think that's a beautiful thought around really challenging our kind of preconceived notions about ways of being. Startups are hard. Being a founder is hard. Being a CEO is hard. And my personal belief around what being a CEO actually is, it's like walking through walls on a daily basis. And those walls are often constructed of the bricks we make for ourselves. So they're things like our own fears, our limiting mindsets, and holding on to the things that might have made us successful yesterday, but won't make us successful today or tomorrow. So I think it's a really poignant point. So I've been privileged to be an AR for 5 years with Foresight, and I actually recently transitioned into the CEO role myself in December. So asking for a friend, you might hear a couple of times. I'm absolutely honored to be here. So we have an amazing panel today. So I'll start with Gareth. Gareth is the CEO and co-founder of Clir Renewables, and this is the leading provider of performance and risk intelligence for the renewable industry. He's raised over 50 million in equity, and we all know how hard that is, equity, debt, and grants, and he's built a company of over 100 team members. He's an entrepreneur, he's a chartered engineer with the IMechE, and he has degrees in mathematics and mechanical engineering from the University of Edinburgh. Moving on, Colin is the CEO of HTEC. It's a Vancouver-based company that works across the clean hydrogen value chain, very topical, lots in the press about the opportunities in hydrogen right now. He develops integrated and operates clean hydrogen solutions to move the transportation sector into a low carbon future. And he's been in that role for the past 12 years. In 2021, he led a financing transaction for more than $200 million. He's been in the hydrogen space for more than 2 decades and spent time at Ballard Power and Sakra on engineering beforehand. Now, Ernest wears multiple hats. So he is a seasoned executive coach, supports cleantech leaders and impact entrepreneurs. So he has his own experience, but also likely has learned from the mistakes and successes of others through those roles. And he's 15 years experience as an entrepreneur himself, working closely with executives of major national and global brands, helping them develop and implement digital strategies. And most recently, he founded Elari Ventures. And this is a science-based leadership accelerator that focuses on developing founders, emerging leaders, and technical experts into truly transformational leaders. I probably didn't do any of these guys justice because they have way more in their back catalog than I could possibly share in this short time. I'll just warn the audience, we're going to get started with a few warm-up questions, but then I'm going to turn to you. So please start putting your Q&A into the Q&A box, and that's where we'll draw our questions from and address to the panelists today. Thanks. So my starter question, and I did warn you I was going to ask this. So when you were like 4, 5, 6 years old, like, what did you want to be when you grew up? And how do you think that shapes the leader you are today? So Colin.
Sorry, the video is jumping around here a little. Yeah, I think I answered your question a little bit off the lip. I'm not sure I ever wanted to grow up, but yeah, I certainly always wanted to build things and enjoyed the creativity aspect of things, but I was certainly far from an artist, so I had to look for other venues, and always interested in building companies. There's many aspects to it, and allows for a lot of creativity and a lot of satisfaction when you build different elements. So I would say quite early on, I was interested in building things and companies and other material aspects, which led me to engineering as well as the entrepreneurial world.
So lots of Lego in your house as a kid, I'm guessing.
I was just about to ask that.
Lots of Lego, lots of tree forts, lots of go-karts and bikes and all that good stuff. So,
Ernest, how about you?
It's funny that Colin started with that. I was also a big Lego fan. I used to build all kinds of different things, from Lego rack and pinion steering, I remember, and all of those kind of things. My first memories in terms of what I wanted to do is I wanted to build robots. I'm not sure what it was. I think there's always this through line of science fiction in what my interests were. So I was very interested in anything that was like Star Trek related and some of those kind of things. And so that eventually led me down a path of going into electronics engineering and then always doing something with technology and building things. And I think now it's coming together in this way of combining all of those different passions and helping people do some good in the world through this new company that I'm building.
Cool. And last but not least, Gareth.
Yeah, I think when I look back to my earliest memories, I think and going back to that, what I wanted to do, God, I mean, I have to scratch my head pretty hard here, but I think the underlying theme when I look back is competition and sports. Wanting to probably, it's sacrilege for me to say this and I'm coming from the middle of Wales, but actually at that age, I was really big into football, or soccer, I should say. And probably wanting to just compete and always playing my big brother and just compete. And when I look back at like the celebrities, if you like, in my family of who people got put up on a pedestal there, I look at I was very keen to join the Marines, the Royal Marines and the Armed Forces at that age. I was quite heavily into as well, and it was that physical competition side and just having some role models there who'd gone out to fight in the Spanish Civil War and everything else. So giving back to a community was always something that was put back on a pedestal. When I look back to that kind of young upbringing there, fortunately I converted to rugby by the time I was 12, but at age 6 it was all soccer. So yeah.
And Gareth, no need to apologize. I'm Cornish, so like.
Good. Yeah, Celtic heart, and that's good, Clir. I like that. That's good.
Thank you, guys. I want, like, Margaret Thatcher was like Prime Minister, so I was like, oh wow, what a great role model. Regardless of your politics, it was quite an amazing time to be a kid in the UK with a female leader. But moving on, it's often super easy, as I alluded to learn from our own mistakes, right? Because it gets hammered home pretty clearly. It's harder to learn from others' mistakes. Like, how do you, as your organization's grown and how you've been successful, like, how do you make sure that kind of that learning, that pace of learning is kind of embedded in like you and your organization? Who wants to jump in?
I think I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I just think it's hard. I mean, you talk about taking like the Clir experience on my first time CEO, if you like. I mean, taking a company, we started out with 4 or 5 staff, went up to 120 staff at our largest there on that side. I mean, you need to have a huge well of self-belief in what you're doing and what you're pushing on, and you also need to be able to listen and learn as you go. And you send out a pitch deck on raising money and what it is, you send it to 10 different people, you'll get 10 different points of feedback there on that side. Everyone's got a different view, and really experienced people come back with very different perspectives on what's valuable there. So you need to use that self-belief, but also be able to take those nuggets of expertise as you go. So 100%, you need to speak to folks who've gone through it and learn as much as you can in the market. But on the flip side, you also need to have that ability to push forward even when you're being questioned a lot. And I'd say, as far as what's an easy answer on that, I think it's hard. And I say, like, for all of us as we go forward in our entrepreneurial journeys there.
Colin?
Yeah, I honestly would, your assumption that it's harder to learn from other people's mistakes and not from your own, I almost think it's the other way around personally. I think one can get pretty caught up, and it's that balance between confidence and recognizing your own shortcomings and learning from your mistakes. It's easy to get an awful lot of advice. The challenge, I think, is just thinking it through and balancing that confidence between not being overconfident, and at the same time, you've got to make some pretty bold moves and digest a lot of people's information. And yeah, there's huge amounts to learn from. And I think, that maybe it's a plug for Foresight, but it's also a plug for other entrepreneurs out there. Some of these accelerators and CEO roundtables are hugely invaluable, or are invaluable, I guess, in connecting with other CEOs to learn from them, and even just walk, hand in hand or arm in arm, right, to tackle the same problems is hugely valuable as you trying to. Yeah, a lot to learn from yourself and from other people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Sometimes life keeps trying to teach you the same lesson. So the same thing keeps coming back until you get it, right? If you've got a blind spot in a particular area. Go ahead, Ernest.
Yeah, those are really great points. And I think it dovetails into the point that I would make as well. And that is, a lot of us operate based on assumptions, unspoken expectations, and certain biases that we have. And so one good space that when I'm working with executives that we try to get to is to question our own assumptions and start off with, I could be wrong. And then from there, we can actually have a point A, and then we can explore what the path to B looks like. One great book is called Think Again by Adam Grant that might dive into a bit more of the psychology and the thinking behind this. And the way that I think about it, and the way that we talk about this with the clients that I work with, is as almost a company as an organism that has, multiple tentacles. You have multiple touch points with different people, and you want to learn from each one of those. And so, so basically what it means is that we want to be able to collect everything from every point of interaction, whether it's customers, stakeholders, shareholders. And we also want to enable cross-team collaboration and communication. It's usually those intersections where innovation can happen. And that requires a culture that supports acquisition of knowledge that way, And then also that culture requires a leadership team that reinforces that kind of behavior. And so those are some of the things that we always look for when it comes to building a learning culture inside of an organization. And that's what I've seen work really well. It takes a lot of effort to stay in that mode and make it safe for people to share. But at the end of the day, it's worth it.
Yeah. And it's like being a parent, right? Like the people in your team, they don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you doing, right? Like what you're modeling for them.
And I think as well, I mean, that's like, come back to that analogy there, is like every kid is different, right? I mean, you go, I got my 2 kids, my 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and like everyone's got advice when you got young kids on what it is and what you do and don't. And listen, everyone's got a very different experience. I think like that learning environment that Ernest talking about is very, very true about building it. But like some folks are on a wartime footing where you got 6 months of runway ahead and you've got to execute on that. And there's certain things you've got to do in that environment. And you may have done a massive raise and you're like, okay, I've got my 2 year, 3 years here to build out something on that side. So the environment that you're in can really shape your capacity around that on that side as well. So,
that's a really good point too, because it raises the idea of how the environment shapes you and how you react in that environment. There's always a symbiotic relationship to that. And I mean, at the end of the day, you're prioritizing different things depending on what stage you're in. If we have a 2-month runway, it's going to be a very different decision making.
There's a great question in the chat, so I'm going to switch to that if you guys don't mind. So this is from Taryn Gray. CEOs are encouraged and rewarded for ambitious moonshot roadmaps. So like, we're going to change the world, especially the pressure from venture capital to fit within their like 100 times model, right? So how do you navigate kind of maybe some of those pressures to focus on like, you know, this big thing, but the practical reality of kind of achievable day after day, setting targets, getting things done, and like that tension potentially between kind of the internal reality and kind of where you want to go long term?
I guess I could jump in a little bit. I think the moonshot is perhaps a bit of a broad generalization that you'll want to think through, right? Typically, when you're talking to a financial investor or strategic investor, they have a thesis and a goal. And typically it's not, hey, go for a moonshot. It's broken down to either de-risk the technology or de-risk the scale up or de-risk the team. And they want to understand a pathway that you envision, and then as you step along it, how far off are you on that pathway? So I'm not sure it's quite the right outlook to say they want moonshots. They certainly want to develop value ahead of others so that they can secure and get rewards for that. But I think the best approach is to understand your investors' thesis that they may have or the bounds that they have for investing. They're typically doing a job. It's not easy to place money and so the more you can understand their side of it, I think you'll break down that moonshot into, okay, what is the roadmap? What are the risks that we have to identify? Some we will identify, we'll just accept. Others we want to be proactive about. So so that'd be my thoughts on sort of the moonshot and the aggressive. It's actually narrower than that, and depending what context or what technology or product you're looking at. Just take the time to break it down, put yourselves in their shoes for a bit, and pretend you had the money. What are you going to do with it? So,
I think setting up Clir, I mean, why we founded Clir, if you like, was, I mean, I come back to always say, like, this is my moonshot, if you like, on this side. So really well aligned, like. So my background, if you like, was I was a technical advisor on wind and solar farms all over the world, worked over in Sri Lanka, China, India, all over Europe and in the Americas. And went into Clir because we wanted to wield capital to be able to scale this. This was our kind of view of how we can impact climate change in a material way on that side. So when you take, I mean, come back to the CEO side, not everyone is venture funded in that on that side. They obviously want big returns, and we wanted to have big impact. So there was a really healthy alignment on that side. And I kind of come back to Bill Gates, I think, quote on saying, like, we always overestimate what we can do in a year, and we kind of underestimate what we can do in the longer term. And I think it's really comes down to managing those expectations. There is setting up that roadmap. Where do you want to be in 10 years on that? No, you saw at the start that Foresight's got their BHAG there on that side, but then what does that look like to get there in 3 years' time? And then for breaking it down into, okay, these are my annual goals and my quarterly roadmap there. I think, you know, there's different names of different business models out there on that side to achieve that. But one of the best things that we got out of Foresight, you know, as a first-time CEO coming in, is taking those tools and applying them, and applying that 90-day. I mean, on that side, it's been really valuable for us adopting those frameworks there, and been really successful about putting those into those bite-sized chunks of what you have to achieve in the next 90 days to get to your annual goal, to get your 3-year target, and so on from there. So yeah.
And Taryn, I'll invite you. Did you want to ask anything in follow-up? Ernest, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm reading this question, and really what I'm reading here is around the solving the tension between how do I work with my team internally versus what is it that I need to pitch to external investors in order for them to invest in us, and how do I manage that tension between the two. And the one thing I can contribute to this conversation is, out of the VCs that I've spoken to and the founders that I've spoken to, the lesson has really been to really know who it is that you're getting into partnership with. There are a lot of different VCs out there. There are a lot of different theses out there when it comes to different funds. And so to really have an understanding where your values actually align. You know, the reality is, if you look at things from the investor's perspective, and again, depending which fund you end up working with, you really have to understand where they're coming from. You know, is this just one of those, like, we're going to make 100 bets and one of them will pay off for all the other ones? Or is this a different strategic, more kind of investing? And so getting to understand the people that you're getting into business with better is probably one of the things that will help lower some of that tension.
And I think, like I say, like, to come back to Ernest's point, I think that's where we've been, say, on the Clir side, I think has been finding investors who are really aligned with what we want to achieve in the market. And I say, like, it's better to not take money and have that alignment than to take money and have that misalignment, right? It's just
that's a hard lesson to learn.
It's a hard lesson to learn, yeah, 100%. But it's an important one.
Great. So we have another question from Cavis. And so the crux of this is, you know, somebody who's currently working in traditional energy industry. So I'm in Calgary, staring out my window. It's a beautiful snowy day, not leaving the house. So, you know, somebody who's been working in the traditional energy industry, looking to move into the innovation tech space, into, you know, come work for one of your companies. Like, what would they need to know, right, in terms of, like, how life is different on your side of the fence?
I can jump in. We do hire quite a bit from the oil and gas in our world. It's you know, hydrogen is about pipes and valves and cylinders and engineering and safety studies. So yeah, there's a fairly enthusiastic group within the oil and gas that does want to transition, and it's usually not too hard to sell. There is the big company, small company transition that has to be dealt with for sure. There's an awful lot of experience you can get from employees that were in bigger companies, but at the same token, they expect different resources to be in place to allow them to be successful. So that's a conversation that has to continue and should happen early on. And I know everybody always in interviews sort of mostly says yes, 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 but yeah, you really got to break it down and make sure those people will be comfortable in a more dynamic environment. And going back to some of the thought leadership that Gareth was talking about and the frameworks, yeah, it's important to get your core values down and your purpose, and just talk that through with them, see if they really understand and are able to get it. And you know, uncover the will, their true will, and if there is a true will there to help with the transition and leave behind some of the safety nets of the oil and gas, then there'll be a way to have that person work for you in your company. But if that will is just chasing the latest shiny thing, that's the wrong person.
Yeah. And perhaps asking the same question in a different way, like when you have hired people from traditional energy industry and it hasn't worked out, like why has it not worked out?
We had one example, largely the pace and the I think the amount of information needed to make decisions is perhaps a lot broader in some of the big companies. You just don't have that luxury. You have to build your confidence in other ways to make those decisions, and that can certainly be a misalignment. You know.
Okay. Coming back on the move over of folks in the traditional energy industry, I think I agree with Colin. Like, we have a huge dearth of expertise that we need for the energy transition right now across the board. I mean, I know like some folks will be doom and gloom about the economy, but like the IRA coming out in the States, just the amount of capital that's going to flood into these markets, whether in renewables like I am or like Colin on the hydrogen space, like we just need talent across the board. So I have no doubt, no hesitation in saying like the expertise that we have in the traditional energy side is 100% needed across, whether it's sales, marketing, whether it's engineering, valves, or grid on that side there. So there's huge needs for what you do. I think the challenge I see in the kind of tactical side of the short-term side of moving over is the oil and gas industry is making a shed load of money right now. I mean, they're making huge amounts. They can pay you amazing salaries on that side. And so I think there's a nat. I remember when I left university in 2005 and some of my buddies went off to go work oil and gas up in Aberdeen when I was graduating in Edinburgh, and I went to work in renewables because that's what I wanted to do. But I probably took a haircut there to work on the side. Don't get me wrong, salaries are more competitive on that side there, but I would say that oil and gas pays really, really well. And it's that big company to small company side of the two factors that I would weigh in there. But there's obviously great paying jobs in the energy and transition as well. So
you might not every second Friday afternoon or every second Friday off as well. In our world, right? Go ahead, Ernest.
I've worked with a couple of people that have transitioned, and it's interesting because the question, the way I'm reading it, it's like, how do I know what's expected on the other side? And really what it comes down to is there's a fear of loss. There's a fear of what's familiar. There's a fear of leaving something that you perceive is safe and going to something that has the opportunity to grow, but isn't guaranteed. And so there's a tension that you have to make a decision for yourself. But really, at the end of the day, if you are in a position where you are in a leadership position inside of a traditional energy company, the easiest way to ease that transition for you or to get an understanding of what it's like is to talk to people at network. Just talk to people that might be working in renewables, and just to get an idea of what it's like. At the end of the day, if you're moving into a smaller startup-y kind of an environment, the pace is going to be different, the resources are going to be different, and you also have the opportunity to grow by leaps and bounds as a leader. You'll be able to take on different challenges. You'll be able to put your fingers into a whole bunch of different places. One place that I have connected with is called Work on Climate. They are based out of San Francisco, but they have a global reach. It's one place where you can go and talk to people that are transitioning out of traditionally tech roles into now climate-related startups and organizations. You can talk to people there just to get an understanding of what it's like on the other side, or just connect with folks that are in the Foresight ecosystem as well. Somebody will be able to give you a real heart-to-heart understanding of what it's like when you move over.
Awesome. I'd love to know, asking for a friend, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So, a lot of people are like, they're resource constrained, then they raise money. Well, more money, more problems, right? You've got more things to do on the other side, more accountability, perhaps. How do you keep yourself both kind of physically and mentally well, coping with the pressure of being kind of a CEO in a kind of fast growing company?
I can jump in with some thoughts, and I'm curious to hear from Gareth and Colin. It's funny because I was just working with an executive last week about talking about this idea that you can sprint a marathon, and otherwise you can die somewhere along the way. So I found in the variety of people that I work with, it's kind of unique to each person. But a couple of years ago, I recorded the 6-part series with a neuroscientist from UVic, and his name is Olav Krigelson. And if anybody's interested in learning more about neuroscience, you can check out his podcast. It's called That Neuroscience Guy. But out of that collaboration, we kind of identified 5 key things to keep you mentally sharp, and to have some cognitive longevity in your decision-making, memory, and all of the different things that make you a really good leader. So, and it comes down to the basics. So 1, sleep. Make sure that you're getting actually enough sleep. Go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time, if anyhow possible. 2, exercise. And so specifically the way that I've interpreted it is I'm using 2 for myself, and I'll talk a little bit about what we do with clients. This isn't the type of work that I do with clients, but this is what we talk about. We use heavier weights for maintaining bone density, because as you get older, your bone density gets weaker, and longevity. We use longer cardio for heart health and to engage the subconscious mind in problem solving. So specifically, this is using the dual track mind, where you can actually actively release what the problem that you're thinking of, and your subconscious mind will work on it. You'll come up with all kinds of different ideas while you're going for a run, bicycle, any kind of longer form cardio. I prefer to do it outside because that has a different benefit. And finally, we also look at diet. So specifically, the way that I look at it is to be mindful of what is it that gives you energy and what is it that makes you sluggish. Eat more of one and less of the other. And then the 2 additional tips are to look at meditation. Anything that's mindfulness related is a really good practice. There's lots of different things that you can try, but basically the way that I'm looking at it is, what is it that's going to give me the maximum cognitive performance for the longest amount of time? How can I improve my focus, decision making, etc.? Meditation is one of those things. I used to be in Zen for a number of years, and actually in Asanga in Calgary, and my practice is now mostly Vipassana based, which is something I would recommend for most CEOs to go do the 10-day intro course. It's one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And finally, social connection, which is the 5th element. What I've noticed is a lot of the senior leaders and a lot of the people that are higher up in different organizations, they tend to neglect the social part of their lives in order to, solve business problems, and they leave very little room for family and other things. If you're able to introduce more social connections, it's been proven to improve memory function and cognitive function over the long term, and overall quality of life. And in some cases, it also creates neurogenesis, which is the generation of new neurons. So those are 5 things that I recommend as a baseline for most folks. And I'm sorry I talk too much here. I'll mute myself.
It makes complete sense, Ernest. I ended a lifetime love affair last year with cheese. So I gave up dairy, red meat, pork, and processed food. And in terms of mental clarity and energy levels, I can never go back because I just feel so much better, right? So all of these changes, they do make a huge difference. Colin, Gareth, thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in, I guess. Yeah, those are great points, Ernest. And I think that's sort of beyond just being a CEO, right? That's sort of feeling a little healthier in life. I agree the social aspect's huge, particularly with these debates about back to the office. I think it's unhealthy staying at home. So whatever your balance is, be cognizant of the benefits of staying home are absolutely, there's a bunch there, but be cognizant of the downside. But going back to your question, how do you march along? I was lucky enough actually just last week or week before to go down to Boulder, Colorado, and have a small group working session with Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great. And yeah, he's quite the individual. He's got a wealth of knowledge, and but one of the things he has done is distill down a lot of this chaos and backed it up with a lot of facts when he looks at Good to Great. And one of the things he talks about is what's called the 20-mile march. And I've heard about it for a while, and it's starting to sort of sink in on how important that is. And it's literally about picking one thing that you're always going to deliver on a routine basis, and that really helps the chaos just swirl around you. And so I'm learning that still. It's as you do it for yourself or your company, I think there's just letting that insight of his and his research sink in, and then starting to adopt these things. And that I would say is a pretty interesting one to deal with the chaos. And I mean, it could literally be in small things. It can be a walk, right? You can make sure you walk every 2 days, and put meetings around it, so that becomes your focal point. And so that's that's good advice. Not really for myself. I'm just the messenger that's passing along Jim and Colin's research and distillation of things. So so we're working on that in our company more, and personally, I think it's also a good thing.
Yeah, we use and the March got it introduced to us by EIR and Rick and Gagner. It's been really helpful perspective there on that side. I guess I don't want to repeat what's already been said. I know sleep, diet, exercise, obviously huge on the side. I think it's really not about time, it's about energy. I think I'll come back to Clir, to your first comment, running through brick walls, if you like. We're just dealing with hard things again and again, whether it's HR issues or it's client issues or whatever it is. And it's fine. I guess I'll go on to those things that give you energy at the end of the day. During COVID, we got a 100-pound bloodhound at home, and I have to walk this blooming dog. You see them on the films, always asleep on the porch. They're like an easy dog to look after. No, these things are working dogs, and they need to go out all the bloody time. So I'm stuck on these hour walks with this dog, and I'm like, well, okay, I'll go on phone calls and I'll listen to CEO podcasts and all this other stuff, and that's great. But just finding that I was just constantly work in that mindset of not thinking but consuming, and actually found just listening to music on those things, it just gave me energy. And the big thing I'll say is everyone's different. People will talk about work-life balance and all these other things. I just emphasize we're all individuals. Some folks are probably fine working at home all the time. I'll be a little bit controversial on some folks there, but for me, I need to be in the office, engaged with my team and spending time to get that energy in the room. I was in Zurich for work recently, and flying back, I found a song I hadn't heard since I was 21, and I just put it on the podcast, and suddenly I had 10 hours of energy just doing work for the full 10-hour flight back, just because I was just so buzzing from this song, if you like, at the time, that just listening to kind of music giving you energy on that side. So I do emphasize that everybody needs to look at themselves on that side, but what gives you energy. For me, it's usually speaking to customers. It gets me excited about the possibilities and what we can do on there. But it's those small things of actually don't listen to podcasts here, go listen to music at that time. So when you get back to your desk, you're actually full of energy because you've been thinking through the stuff and just imagining what you can achieve. The other thing for energy, I just come back to Colin's comment there. I'll speak to Jim Collins there. I do think that you can start thinking small and get caught up in the kind of the immediate tactical issues that are dealing with you at the company, and exposing yourself to folks who are thinking big is it's an amazing, inspiring thing for you to do those bigger, harder challenges. Sometimes I know I was in an accelerated program. We went with some other companies who are flying satellites up. They've got spaceships. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the world. And just surrounding yourselves with that kind of people talking and thinking that way is shit, I've got to think bigger. And that can give you a lot of energy there to kind of push forward. So I do come back to all great advice here on the side, but we're all individuals. I come back to and just look at what works for yourself on that side as well.
I'll add one more. I just want to add one more thing, just from the perspective of, if we're talking about mental health here. So we talked about elements of performance, cognitive performance, performing under stress, and a few other things. One other aspect that I don't see a lot of conversation around is getting some external help, getting some external support. So I have worked with a therapist. A few of my clients have worked with a therapist. I'm a coach. I worked with a coach. I have a coach. So there's some of these external supports that can really help externalize some of those pressures that most people keep internal. And I found this especially with men and with higher positions for some reason. It's all held inside. So that might be something else that might be worth exploring, to getting some of that kind of support.
I'll also add to that, my spouse just to be clear, like just having a tremendous life partner is a huge benefit there, and yeah, would not be achieving what I could without my family there on that side. And talk about the mental health side and how helpful that is. Going home to an awesome family is a huge privilege and help on pushing stuff forward.
Yeah, and I've trained my 8-year-old. He's big into 80s rock. So if you're driving through Calgary and you hear "We Will Rock You" or something like that, it's like very loud out of a truck. So awesome. So financing. You guys have raised money, right? Significant amounts of money. You know, I took to a lot of ventures. There's a question in the chat on, you know, they need money to move forward, but maybe they're not quite ready. Like, how do you know when you're ready? And like, how much do you ask for? Do you play it safe, or do you ask for what you really need?
Yeah, it's a really good question, but I don't think there's a really good answer. Yeah, dive into it. I think if possible, try some feelers and you know, typically, I think try and find out what or be cognizant of what the sort of tailwinds are around you. And if you're fighting an uphill or a headwind, you may just have to readjust your expectations. I mean, typically the tide always turns, right? The winds turn. So just be cognizant of, if you do have a tailwind, then you should be a bit more buoyant or a bit more aggressive on the fundraising side. But if you're tailwinds within your sector or the globe as a whole, just be cognizant and give yourself the right amount of time. You know, it's a 1-year exercise, I think, and if you think shorter than that, you'll probably be disappointed. So if the timing's right, yeah, it can happen reasonably quick, but at the end of the day, the whole process is going to take at least 12 months to conceive, decide, yeah, what your ambition should be relative to the market and the trade winds, and then there's the whole negotiate and closing of it. So you can somehow give yourself a year. That's important.
And if we think specifically about like the art and the science of fundraising, what are some of those key ingredients that you need to really have nailed to have a successful raise?
I think like as CEOs, I mean, the big thing I always say is optionality as we go forward on that side. Like, we've always got plan A, but like, I think there was some questions on here about how do you know people oversell to their investors or whatever it is. The investors are looking to understand they're not expecting you to have a perfect business model. Particularly where we are on startups and stuff, we've got assumptions, we've got expectations on how we're going to do, but we don't have a crystal ball on what's going to happen as we go forward. And when we're going out to kind of raise on our side, I look back at our series B there on the side. Like, we went out to raise 10 million at the time. We ended up into an exit negotiation and going through that process that didn't work out on that side. We had to walk away. And then we went back to Series B and raised about 25 million equity and you know, set 7 million in debt on top. And it's the same process now. When I say on that side, we have a plan. Obviously, on the SaaS side, it's lightweight. It's a little bit different to folks on the hardware side, but the option of doing a smaller round if we need to, but to also have planning in place to go and raise something bigger there if it's available in the market. But also to be clear, like, if we can have a bigger impact on climate change and get shareholder return there, the exit is always an option as well as we go forward there. So from my side as CEO, you know, I'm really trying to keep options open because the market will kind of drive on what is the best shareholder value there on that side with the, you know, the value of your product there on that side. So really looking at those as we go forward there of maintaining that optionality. Yeah, we're obviously having a main plan and working around that as you go forward.
Yeah, I agree on that. Keeping, you don't really know what's going to happen within that time frame. One area that I think in the clean tech world is an opportunity for all of us, and we were successful, is matching strategics with the financials investors. So strategics can play a huge role in sort of validating what you're all about, and they like, you know, they'll want you to raise more money so you can be more successful, and the financials really like it when it's validated by a strategic, as whether it's helping them sell their equipment or a channel to market. It's I think it's for the clean tech world, it's a very good strategy to go out and try and find that blend. They complement each other quite nicely.
And do you want to give a bit of explanation for kind of the different types of strategics? Like, you know, can you give some specific examples of, for those who are at kind of an earlier stage in their journey, like what they might look like?
Yeah, so I mean, a strategic can be, like I said, a supply chain. So you end up selling or buying or getting you become the channel to market for their product, or vice versa. A strategic can be your channel to market for your products, and they benefit along the way. So that's, I think, on the product flow. It could be a host of some way, shape, or form that is sort of a stakeholder in your whole path to success, and they'll understand, or you should understand, what their success they get out of it. So so just take a look at who you're all benefiting, and try and bring them together.
I think,
and with the end in mind, they could be an acquirer eventually, right? They could be the person that ends up buying you if you're looking.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit careful on that, because you can financials want to know that there's not just one inside buyer, so you do have to be careful on that. So, but it is a pathway for sure. Yeah,
just sit back and watch the big hairy mammoths fight over you. That's the ideal, right? Like, have at least a couple in the game. Go ahead, Ernest, jump in.
Well, I have not gone through this process before, so I can't speak to it from personal experience. But it sounds like what I'm reading in this question, it's almost like your relationship with risk and your relationship with confidence in your product and what you're bringing to the market. So that might be worth exploring a little bit more. It's, the question is how do I know how much to ask for? Should I ask for more? Should I ask for just enough? And that really is clarified with having a honest conversation with yourself, and then making sure that the people that you're looking at for external investments are aligned with values.
And I'll be clear on the amount. Like, I mean, I don't hear from many CEOs, "Oh, crikey, I shouldn't have raised that last 10 million. Oh, I wish I didn't have that 5 million in the bank," that whatever it is. And one of the sound piece of advice I got from Jenny Yang, who's on our board, she's a great local entrepreneur here in Vancouver, is if the money's there to a certain degree, take that extra amount there on that side. I know some folks will disagree with that on that side, but I don't hear from many CEOs and founders on that side that they regretted taking that extra bit, especially when you've got business models that you're proving out for the first time on scaling and growing and everything else.
Yeah, have that honest discussion about contingencies and how close you are to the edge, or how much you're trying to thread that needle. And they recognize it, right? I mean, they want their money to be successful, right? So they will, by engaging them in your problems, that you'll lead to, I think, a better result. And one is managing, the risk and the expectations and the contingency.
And most VCs will see, 3,000 pitches in a year. So
be memorable.
Yeah.
Stand out. So in Foresight, I feel like it's impossible to participate in any of our programs and not have it drilled into you how important customer discovery is.
Mm.
So I'd like to kind of ask each of you, like, how has customer discovery that you did early on shaped your journey, and like how it shows up now in your business now that you're a bit further down the road?
Anyone else want to jump in first?
Yeah, happy to jump in. I mean, like I worked in the industry for over a decade. Like, when we quit my job end of 2016, I wanted to take advantage of low cost and cloud-based computing with everything I'd learned on analyzing wind farm and solar farm performance. So it wasn't like I was coming in cold from not having spoken to the customers. I spent 10 years doing the learning expertise from the start. So what was always interesting was, some of the training would be like, hey, you need to do all this discovery on the side. I just really emphasize that you need to know what are the assumptions that you really want to test and validate on that side. So I emphasize to my team, myself, like how many customers have we spoken to this week? Have we spoken to understand what are our key assumptions? So it's really important to be clear about what are the key things that you need to test and understand. Because I think we actually made an error on our side after Series B. We actually scaled up our product team to be very, very large. Say very large, but in hindsight. Because we wanted to scale the company faster on that side, and we definitely found that we were in that side, retesting the assumptions we already knew to a certain degree on that side. There was a lot of that side. Just being very clear about what are the things that you need to learn and understand, but making sure that you're speaking to customers all the time and getting that feedback so you can push forward there. You can't ever lose that connection or be complacent on that side.
I'll add to that to say that, coming previous to this work, I did a lot of digital strategy, digital marketing work. And something that I often used to see is our businesses that would create a thing and that would go out and try to find customers for it. And I've seen that quite a few times in startups as well, where they would build a widget and then, okay, well, who do I sell this to and how do I sell it? So as a result of being in that space and to basically, support what Gareth is saying, is that you have to be in conversation with the people that you want to serve. The sooner you do that, the better the product market fit becomes. And so we want to look at intersecting opportunities, and in those conversations, you can discover opportunities to pivot or shifts in product market fit, or even the product iteration itself. And so all of that comes from having conversations with your customers.
Yeah, I agree. We do take it a little bit broader in our world, that it's certainly not just about the product and the customer fit with the product. If I think a prime example in the world is the ESG movement. So customers want more than just the product. They often want to know what's behind it, what your corporate culture is and goals, and that ties into we see our shareholders as important as our customers, right? So understanding what they want. Employees are equally as important as the customer. And then also, in the clean tech world, the government, I think we see the government as a very, very important client. And a lot of people, I think, tend to have an expectation the government should just help them. But if you think about a broader stakeholder engagement, obviously there's a lot of feedback and listening for your clients, but you also want to look the other direction and see what the client's seeing behind you.
We're running up against the end of the hour, so I'll just ask one more quick question on attracting, retaining, motivating talent and making sure their contribution. So, what do you think your company is using as a kind of very competitive piece of that puzzle that might be different from what others do in this space? Like, what is the thing that makes it special about, I want to go get a job with you, Colin, what's my interaction like what's special about, how you're going to motivate me and align me with your vision?
Yeah, I guess in a broader context, I think the clean tech world has an advantage of providing the opportunity to be on the frontier and are pioneering. So we, right in our core values, we identify pretty key things that look, we're a pioneering company, whether you're not going to fit in if you don't see the world that way. We promote balance, and so I think the core values are good to articulate to help that alignment. And if you really find and attract the right people, you don't have to do a lot of motivating. So I think the clean tech has a general advantage, and then within that context, make sure you're not just greenwashing and you're true to it, and you're there to lend your talents to the transition that needs to happen. And I think that I guess just by being Ernest is a good way to attract the people you want on your team.
Gareth, what's your secret recipe for?
Yeah, look at Clir. Like, we're a data platform here in Vancouver, so we've got a huge amount of software expertise. We have to attract, obviously, use the wind turbine as a symbol there. There's not many tech opportunities here in Vancouver to work on wind and solar farms and have, direct impact on lowering the cost of capital on these assets to increase the output and everything else. So we've been using that obviously as a huge way to attract talent in. Our CTO came from Amazon. Our lead developers can go and earn buckets of gold at these large and tech firms. We can't necessarily compete in quite that way with them on that side, but we can offer this amazing impact on the planet. So our mission, our values around inclusion, innovation and sustainability, and then the probably the three of the values that get everybody excited the most. But the other point then we have is the renewable energy expertise, and what we find is obviously similar to software, huge dearth of expertise compared to the demands from the market of what we need to move the industry forward. So we've got to be very global in our approach to this. We've got staff in South America and Europe, across the US and Canada, to get the folks who know how to run wind turbines really, really well and run solar farms, also financing of these areas of how we use data. So we've had to take a different approach depending on the kind of need there. And the big point to us is the scale of impact is we're on so many assets. They just can't have that impact on renewable energy anywhere else.
And quickly, Ernest.
I'll add a couple of things. So I might have a bit of a different perspective. So everything that was shared, I think, is fantastic advice. Really, what it boils down to is a couple of things. So one is to have a clear vision of the future that you're trying to create, invite people into that vision. And then on the back end of that, be really clear about your brand and your values in action. It's one thing to have values, it's the other thing to actually live the values. And so I can feel that I identify with those when I go into the workplace, and I can see they're being honored, and that's the way that you actually are. I think that's the harder part. And at the end of the day, I've taken a lot of really weird information. So sometimes I'll kind of watch what the narrative is on Instagram, TikTok, about people working and what they say about their cultures and their workplaces. And so really it boils down to just a few simple things. So be treated well, be compensated well, be listened to. And for some, we also want to be a part of something that aligns with the kind of future that they want to live in. And so if you're able to hit some of those kind of markers, or ideally all of those, you tend to attract people that are willing to share in that vision with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I heard some amazing things today around alignment, values, founder, what you're achieving with your venture, but also your investors, your advisors, and kind of where they're at as well. But also kind of that potential gap, hopefully not gap, between vision and execution, and how important to understand kind of there's always going to be assumptions there. You're always going to be testing those and refining those, and how important it is for the CEO role. You need to tackle the hard things but not get pulled into the weeds too much. And I loved our conversation around well-being as well, because I think it's so important, because you can never be successful over the long run unless you can keep up the pace of demand on you. I want to thank the Foresight team, obviously, for organizing this. Thank you for the panelists for being so open and vulnerable today and sharing some real advice from the trenches. And obviously, thank you to everybody who joined us for your great questions and in your engagement. And I see Nisha's flagged in the chat upcoming other events that obviously would love to see some more of you guys show up to. So Shay, is there anything else you wanted me to cover before we wrap up today? Or we good?
You just did a great wrap up. So yeah, I was going to say fantastic facilitation, Clir, and thank you so much, Colin, Gareth, and Ernest. I know you're some of the busiest people ever, so we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom. And yeah, we've got some exciting events coming up, Investor Readiness Workshop, and as well our next Fireside Chat in about a month, partnering with Wales with a few exciting speakers. So thank you, Clir. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Clir. That was really great.
Yeah,
well moderated.
Yeah, totally.
Nice job.
Have a good day, all.